I mean, lots of people who worked for Trump in high-level national security positions have been sounding the alarm for months. We've heard versions of the same warnings over and over and over again. But these latest comments from Kelly do seem to be breaking through in a way that the others have not.
President Trump, though, is being called a fascist, not only by Kamala Harris in her town hall meeting tonight, but by his former chief of staff.
Former President Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, John Kelly.
Former Trump chief of staff John Kelly issued a warning.
John Kelly said the former president praised Adolf Hitler in private.
The former president praised Adolf Hitler.
Made admiring statements about Hitler.
He would praise Adolf Hitler, the Nazi leader who orchestrated the murder of 6 million Jews.
Also, that he is the definition of a fascist.
John Kelly said the former president fits the definition of a fascist.
The Republican nominee meets the definition of a fascist.
The definition of a fascist.
A fascist.
John Kelly used the words fascist and dictator.
Kelly went on to say Trump didn't understand the Constitution.
Keep in mind, John Kelly was the longest-serving chief of staff for Donald Trump.
And the Trump campaign is not happy.
So that is what millions of Americans heard on their local news stations this week. Still one of the most trusted sources of news out there in the country. So if you think this is all just some sort of cable chattering class Democratic fixation, it isn't. I mean, according to a new poll from ABC News, half of the country sees Trump as a fascist. According to a new New York Times Siena poll, 76% of the country believes American democracy is under threat. And yet, there's no denying that the race is still tied. So, of course you're anxious. I am anxious too. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high. We've been through a lot as a country. We're just 8 years removed from a misogynistic racist defeating the first female nominee, thanks in part to a boost from Vladimir Putin. And we're just 4 years removed from the violent insurrection Trump himself incited. But in 9 days, and in the days leading up to that, to be honest, the American people get to decide what happens next. And I just want to give you just a few quick reasons why you shouldn't be completely freaking out quite yet. I mean, first of all, the race might be tied, but late deciders are breaking for Harris. According to that poll from the New York Times, 15% of voters haven't decided yet, and Harris is leading with that group 42% to 32%. That wasn't the case just a month ago. Second, people are already voting, and in some key states, women are outvoting men. And Democrats are returning ballots in many of these states at a higher rate than Republicans. According to a report in Politico, early voting in Michigan, which just started, is so far exceeding expectations. I mean, across the state, according to this report, women and black voters have cast early ballots at a higher share than at this point in 2020. Even among young men, a group we've been hearing over and over again, Trump has spent a great deal of money and effort courting. Harris still has a huge lead among young men who say they will definitely vote. And last but certainly not least, Kamala Harris has a far better ground operation and turnout operation. She also has Jen O'Malley Dillon, her campaign chair, who was a part of the team that led Obama's re-election in 2012. She was like 8 months pregnant at the time, just so everybody knows. She managed Joe Biden's winning campaign in 2020, and she was selected by Vice President Harris, asked to stay on this summer because she knew there was no one better for the job. She knows more about campaigns than me for sure, and maybe almost anyone else out there right now. She's joining me now. She's the chair of the Harris for President campaign. Jen, it's great to see you. I know your life is insane right now, and I appreciate you taking the time. So let me just start here. I mean, I am getting stopped constantly in coffee shops and train stations with questions about the state of the race. I cannot even imagine what your life is like out there right now. I will preface by saying I think it's good people are a little freaked out right now at this point. But what should people not be freaked out about the race? You are closer to it than probably almost anyone else.
Well, hey, Jen, it's great to be here with you. And you are right to say that it is okay to be nervous and to be anxious. But don't be freaked out, because we feel very good about where we are. We are very confident we're going to win this thing. And it's not just because we want to win. It's because what we're seeing in the numbers and the early voting that you were just talking about, what we're seeing with this extraordinary enthusiasm everywhere we go, we are seeing signs where we look to make sure that we are on track to win a very close race. This is going to be a close race. We've known it the entire fall. We're very focused on that. We've built for these moments right now, and what we are seeing from turnout to our volunteer operation to the enthusiasm growing is exactly where we want to be, and we're really confident about that and confident we're going to win this thing.
So I want to dig into those early data in a second, because everybody's an expert on early voting now. I don't know if you've seen that out on social media, but basically we hear different iterations of this every day. It's a dead heat, it's a coin flip, it's tied. Is that pretty much an accurate characterization of where the race sits?
Well, we do really think it is a margin of error race, and we've seen that consistently throughout the fall. So often, as you know, at this point in a campaign, you might say, well, our chances are not as good in one state or another, or we have one pathway to 270 electoral votes. Obviously, that's all we care about, is getting to 270. But we see in every one of our true battleground states that all of them are within the margin. And it's not a margin of error of 4 or 5. I mean, we're talking about a point here or there. We see that this campaign and the vice president has multiple pathways to 270 electoral votes, and that's really great for us. It presents a lot of opportunity. It also makes it tough because we have a pretty wide map. We're out there traveling everywhere. We're building a massive organization that is really driving home in each of these states. But we do feel very good about this. We also know, though, it's extremely close. So, you know, I'm sure you'll ask me about polls. You know, my mom asked me about polls. I get it. But there's nothing that we are seeing that's surprising us right now. This is close. We are on track to win this thing, but it's going to take the work of the next 9 days to close this out. And that's the most fundamental thing that we're focused on.
So let me ask you about the early voting, because as people know, most states across the country, especially the early states, or the key battleground states, voting is happening right now. Michigan early voting just started. I gave some of those numbers. As you're looking at that data, what are you seeing that is encouraging to you, that people out there who are trying to reassure their neighbor or their friend or their mom can tell them about the early vote numbers?
Yeah, so we actually feel very, very good about what we're seeing for early vote. But first of all, there is no historical precedent for this race. I guess that's probably an obvious thing to say, but the reality is what we are seeing is pretty unique to 2024. We are seeing high turnout everywhere. We are definitely seeing that our voters are turning out, and we look at two things. We look at how to make sure just the sheer volume of our voters are on track for what we need to win this race in our states to get to 270 electoral votes. But we're also looking at the number of voters who are not traditional voters. They're lower propensity voters. And when we look head to head at our vote versus the Republicans, we're coming out ahead there. More of our people that don't traditionally vote are showing up. Just in the last 2 days in Clark County in Nevada, for instance, where Las Vegas is, we have seen higher youth turnout in the last 2 days than we've seen at any other point this cycle. You mentioned Michigan. We had 145,000 voters vote early just yesterday alone. So we really like what we're seeing. We're seeing strong turnout. Our margins are strong, and the folks that we're focused on, those lower propensity voters that don't always vote, they're tuning in and they're showing up at a higher level in support of the vice president.
And that's just to echo, this is so interesting. It's significant because lower propensity voters means if they're voting now, you don't have to chase them on election day. And that's a very big deal if they're turning out in Nevada that way. Let me ask you about abortion. I mean, one of the things obviously that has changed, it's obviously a huge issue for Kamala Harris, huge issue in a contrast in this campaign. It is a big thing that happened since the last presidential election is, of course, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Do you think women, I hear this sometimes, I mean, do you think women who are turning out, are there women who are turning out that are not being captured in polls? Is there a portion of people who, as pollsters are looking at the 2020 electorate, that they may not be capturing how angry and outraged women are in this moment?
Well, look, I'm glad you brought this up, and hopefully your viewers saw the vice president in Houston. You mentioned that earlier, where, you know, it was an amazing event. And of course, amazing to have people like Beyonce and Willie Nelson there. But truly what was amazing was the real people, the real stories of people that have been harmed by Donald Trump. That, you know, so much of what we talk about and we're focused on is making this case that a second term of Donald Trump will be worse than the first. When you talk about reproductive freedom, you don't have to make that case in the future. It is happening right now. And the bravery and the courage of these women and men sharing their stories about what they have gone through so nobody has to go through that again is so powerful. And it's powerful to mobilize our voters for sure. I'm sure you feel this way too. This isn't just a women's issue. I I, like so many women in the world, have had my own fertility journey, and my husband's been along with me on that. It impacts all of us. But this is also an issue for those undecided voters that are still out there. And we think they're a small number, but 3 to 5% in these battleground states of people that haven't made up their mind yet. Maybe they're not that political. Maybe they don't tune in all the time. But we know that they are more open to hearing from the vice president than they are Donald Trump, and they want to be there with us. And an issue like reproductive freedom, to remember that that is an issue on the ballot and that we can all do something about it, is really powerful. And you're going to continue to see us drive this home in the final stretch.
Let's make a deal. I ask this question, you answer it, you answer the actual question, and we'll move on to another issue. Let's try it this way. Are you personally okay if Donald Trump says that he wants his generals to be like Hitler's generals?
Americans do not want to talk about that. We've heard a lot of extreme things about Donald Trump from Donald Trump. It's kind of par for the course. It's really, unfortunately, with a guy like that, it's kind of baked into the vote at this point.
Republican Congressman Tom Emmer says people don't want to talk about it. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu says it's all baked in. They sure seem to think voters simply don't care. But the Harris campaign is betting they do. Jen O'Malley Dillon is back with me. She's the chair of the Harris for President campaign. I just showed, this is just a few of them, but you hear this from Republicans on TV, Trump supporters all the time, who seem to think fascism and kind words for Hitler is all baked in and that voters don't care. I know you don't agree with that, but what are you seeing? Because you look at this from the strategy of winning over voters. What are you seeing in terms of why reminding people of this is effective, and who is it effective with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have seen from the beginning that when people who have worked closest with Donald Trump speak out, it has real impact on voters, and certainly on these voters that we're still trying to reach, this small segment of undecided voters. We know anecdotally, we know from our research, when someone like John Kelly stands up and speaks about what it was like to serve under Donald Trump, speaks about how he clearly wants unchecked power, the American people are not comfortable with that. And that is an important contrast that we have. And I think that it's fundamental to everything that the vice president is talking about, how we turn the page from this, how we have a leadership in this country that's focused on the issues that the American people care about. So we do think it's important. It's really important when people that are closest to Donald Trump speak out about it. And we've seen that across all of our data.